Hey, Chris from CritCast here with another edition of the CritCast, and just about getting ready to wrap up the year 2011. Finally, I know I would have liked to have done this a bit sooner, but things happen, and anyway. Better late than never, right? In any case, this is going to be the top 10 movies of the year, based on my criteria of the movies being 2011 releases and that I actually saw them in the theater. So no any first timers on DVD or Blu-ray or anything like that. I think I saw enough, or to make a legitimate top 10. Although there's always going to be a few that I missed that I'll catch up with down the line. And again, I apologize. I'm still a little bit sick. Just getting over it. Not too bad now. But anyway, if you saw my last video, that covered numbers 20 through 11. And now we're going to pick up at number 10 and work our way up to number 1 to see what my favorite movie of the year was. Being with number 10, it's going to be the horror movie Insidious. It's pretty awesome. It's a haunting tale from the guys that brought us Saw, James Wan and Leigh Whannell, or Whannell, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce his name. Um, but it's very different than Saw. It's it feels like if Poltergeist was made in Japan. It's not quite as crazy as say Hausu is, but it's certainly going in that direction. It's you got bits of paranormal activity. You have a very strong feeling of the Japanese ghost stories, where basically once you're trapped, there's no way you're getting out. It's really it's a roller coaster ride. It's not a story driven ride. It's got some interesting characters, but it's really built upon by the atmosphere and the tone, which I think is just fantastic. It's a movie that I've watched a few times, and it hasn't lost any of its effect. If you haven't seen it, definitely check that out. Number 9 is a movie that probably very few, if any of you, have actually seen. Frankly, I when I saw it, there's only a couple other people in the theater, and I haven't actually run into anyone who actually has seen this, much less know it. It's Archie's Final Project. It's a different movie, but it's well worth the effort of finding. It's it's a movie that takes us on the ride into the mind of a modern media saturated youth in this in a strong portrait of a sort of disenfranchisement that could have been avoided. It's an interesting movie that you can blame on deterioration of communication as dictated by modern media and technological advances. I know that sounds like I wrote it, and yes, it's not something that I just made up with off the top of my head. Um, but it's a challenging film that may never actually really find an audience, although I hope that it does. It's a movie that I'm actually surprised I got to see in a theater. It's a film that it's hard to describe. It's about teen angst and suicide, and it's told through the multimedia, and it really just you really just gonna have to see this. I'm not gonna be able to describe this too well for you, but it does feature a good performance from the central character played by Gabriel Sunday, who helps center the film and keeps us going through this. It keeps us involved in this, and it's really a pretty fascinating movie. You should definitely check it out. Moving on to number 8 is Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. It's a movie that I didn't actually do a print review of it, but it was actually one of the first video reviews that I did. If you want to check back in my video history, um, it's really an interesting film that puts you in the mind of this young girl who has gotten out of a cult and is in this rather fractured mental state as she's trying to reintegrate into society by staying with her sister and her husband. But the problem is that the movie puts us really into her shoes by intercutting her time with the cult and her time with her sister, and how pretty closely related they are, and how all the different events have been jumbled up inside her mind. And it's really something that it's unique, it's different. It blends past and present in a way that it's sometimes hard to discern the two. Right, just as she's trying to get herself back together, we're kind of thrown into that fracture state as well. No, it's a very good film, starring Elizabeth Olsen as the titular character. If you never heard of her, she's actually the younger sister of the Olsen twins, Mary Kate and Ashley. Um, and this is a very good start for her. I mean, her first major role. And also, the film also features John Hawkes as the charismatic leader of the cult, and that guy is always great to watch. Definitely check this out if you get a chance. It's an interesting film. It's different, and well, what else can I say? Moving on to number 7 is Source Code. This is a fascinating film. It's a science fiction film, but it's a clever science fiction film. It's a movie that it seeks to bring some sense of hope, but it ends up asking even more questions by introducing this questionable morality. It's really an interesting thing, if you see it. It's kind of like that scene at Vantage Point where Dennis Quaid going, stop, rewind that, and they keep replaying the scene over and over again. That's what happened in this movie a lot. They replay the sequence of events over and over again, but each time there's little things that are different as they try to find out who the bomber is. It's not as simple as trying to find a terrorist, trying to plant a bomb. It becomes much more than that, and the end is pretty open and ambiguous. It's pretty fascinating. This is actually the second film from Duncan Jones, who first made Moon with Sam Rockwell. That was a fantastic movie. That was another top 10 movie for me a couple of years ago. This is another fascinating entry from him. Can't wait to see what he does next. It's really definitely check this out. Moving on to number 6 is Hannah. This is a movie that was actually top 5 for me in the first half of the year. It ended up being number 6, which is not too bad. It's a fascinating film. It's you have this character of Hannah played by Saoirse Ronan, um, who was raised by her father out in the woods. Taught to survive, taught to fight, taught to hunt and kill and all that stuff. And then something happens, and now she's on her own, and she has to navigate through society and interact with people. So, the one thing that she wasn't trained for, she's never really encountered this before. It's really interesting in seeing Hannah reveal her humanity, see her curiosity and wonder as she encounters these people for the first time. Besides being chased by the government and being forced to do some crazy things. It's really interesting film to see. It's a coming of age story. It's a action thriller that comes face to face with the art house. It's a cinematic fairy tale. Um, Not everyone's probably gonna like it. It may not have enough action for you, but it's really interesting. And the character of Hannah can be, you make a case study out of her and just it, without even considering anything else in the film. It's definitely one worth checking out. Moving on to number 5 is The Artist. Um, it actually recently won, I think, Best Picture at the Critics' Choice Awards, I believe, as well as Best Director. This is an amazing movie. It's a silent movie. I can't remember the last time I actually saw a silent movie on the screen. Well, it was actually a few years ago when I saw a reprint of Metropolis, which was fantastic. But anyway, this is a current silent film. Um, it's it's sweet, it's wonderful. It's this charismatic story of the silent era. It's got the dawn of the talkies. It's about pride and bad decisions and love, and it's it really feels genuine to the era. There are a couple scenes where they sort of look at the camera and they give you a wink and a nod, and they let you know that it is a modern movie, but at the same time, it's very well done as a period piece. The star Jean Dujardin, French actor, is fantastic. I mean, he looks like he belongs right in the silent era, coming across as a cross between, say, like a Douglas Fairbanks and Gene Kelly. Um, he's got a very expressive face. He looks like a silent movie star, and the movie it's beautiful. It's a great film. It's nostalgic. It's fun. It's involving, and stuff you wouldn't think of from a modern silent film. So don't let the fact that it's a silent film shot in black and white push you away from it, because you'd be missing out on what is really one of the best movies of the year. Moving on to number 4 is probably one of the more controversial films of the year in terms of it being a remake. Is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. It's funny though. When I saw the original Swedish film a couple years ago, and that was also a top 5 for me, it reminded me of a David Fincher film. And now here we are with the Hollywood version, directed by David Fincher. Seems perfect casting, perfect directing for me. But rather than remaking the movie, they actually went back to Stieg Larsson's original novel and actually did a new adaptation of that. It's my understanding that the screenwriter actually never saw the Swedish film, which I hope that's true because that helps help separate the two a little bit. But it's not the case, kind of like with Let Me In and Let the Right One In, where I actually love both of those films, and the Swedish film and the American film of the Dragon Tattoo is also fantastic. Um, in some ways, that this actually might be superior to the Swedish film, mainly with David Fincher's direction is fantastic. There's stuff that he does, his eye for the screen, the way he sets the scene up, the way he paces everything, the editing, the beats. There's a certain flow to this which is just fantastic. Um, it's also what's also great is Rooney Mara's performance as Elizabeth Salander, more than just trying to duplicate the performance of Noomi Rapace, who was fantastic in the Swedish film. She brings her own style to it. She brings something different to the role, and it's fantastic. Her performance is very solid. I really hope they actually get to make the sequels to this. I'd like to see some more of the story. Um, but really, don't let the fact that it's another version, turn you away. It can be a challenging film at times, and other times it's pretty straightforward as a murder mystery. But there's very interesting character stuff going on in here. Um, okay, let's move on. Number three, 50-50, the cancer comedy. Yes, um, I can say I never expected this to be a top five, much less even a top 10, film for me. Um, it's hard to think of cancer as being funny, but they make this work here. It's a movie that it's really funny, it's touching, and it's never manipulative. That's what's really fantastic about this is that it never treats cancer as a joke. It certainly uses humor to maybe diffuse it a little bit, but it doesn't shy away from the actual emotion of the situation, and that's all helped out by the fantastic performance by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who has fast become one of my favorite actors. The guy is just fantastic in pretty much everything I've seen him in, including stuff like if you haven't seen Brick, or Mysterious Skin, or The Lookout, or 500 Days of Summer, which I absolutely adore. Here he's just as good. It's another great film. Even Seth Rogen, he co-wrote the screenplay. He didn't. He's not the lead, but he does play an important supporting role, and he is pretty funny here. Whether or not try to put whether or not you like or loathe him aside, because I know there's a lot of people that don't like him out there. Because this is actually a really good film that really is definitely be checked out. Moving on to number two is Hugo, um, the new film of Martin Scorsese, and believe me when I tell you, he has created another masterpiece. This is a movie that feels like the sort of movie that he's been wanting to make for decades. If you know his love of cinema and his involvement in the effort of film preservation, you'll understand where it's coming from with a lot of this movie. It feels like a labor of love, and at the same time, though, it's really different from anything that he's ever made before. I mean, like Goodfellas, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull. I mean, this isn't like anything like that. This is a family film that really has a sense of wonder and magic to it. You look seeing it through the eyes of a young boy, and seeing these early moments of cinema history. It's really fascinating, and it's really a magical film they really should check out. And finally, my number one movie of the year, Super 8. Seriously, yes, this is a wonderful movie that comes out firing on all cylinders. It makes me nostalgic for my younger days seeing movies. Movies like E.T., Ghostbusters, Goonies, all those movies in the early days. It shows a love of filmmaking by everyone involved, and it's it doesn't play like a franchise. It's just a movie that seems intent on wanting to tell a story for everyone, where it's nostalgic to like the Spielberg '80s, but it also feels like a modern film, and it's really it makes me smile. I mean, it's a fantastic movie for the family. Um, there's Elle Fanning has a fantastic performance in it. There's one particular scene in there where it seems like all the characters and everyone involved just kind of stopped and started watching her. As she acted the scene out in the movie within the movie, as it were. And even still, it's 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 just a great movie that when you see it, you really want to start right over again and watch it over again. Um, But that about wraps it up. That's my top 10 movies for the year 2011, and I'm hoping to see some more great films in 2012. I know it's probably gonna be a little while before we get any of those. I mean, it hasn't gotten off to a great start yet. But again, January, it's usually very hit or miss. It's just kind of a dumping grounds. But anyway, that's my top 10 for the year. Go back and watch my 11th 20 through 11 to see some other great films. I had another video where I went over through some of the disappointments and surprises of the year. There's some good films in there to check out. And stay tuned for my next video, which I'm hoping to cover some of the films I'm looking forward to this year. In any case, be sure to visit me over at criticaloutcast.com and see some more of my full-length ramblings. Thanks. Talk to you later.